Hey, you know what? It looks like the music bugged out. So let's just go ahead and start here. Let me start the second stream recording here so we can go ahead and get going. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording. Relatively short one today. Just want to talk about content and design for just a few minutes here. So, just like usual, we're talking about theory and how we can kind of think about this theory as we are working toward practice. So we're talking about content versus design. And one of the ideas that we kind of think about when we're talking about web design is basically separating the content from the design. So when we are trying to separate content from design, what exactly does that mean? And then how can we do it? And so really when we're looking at this, right, we first have to start out by asking ourselves the question of, well, what just exactly is content, right? What is content? And so we've sort of talked about different things sort of related to content up until this point, right? Like we talked about type a few weeks ago, and we said that type was the voice of the site, and we said that that was sort of related to the content. And we say that design is related to the content, right? Because we want things to be in line. We want our content and the design of our site to be congruous, if you will, but they're not dependent on one another, which I think is super important. And we'll get more into that as we kind of go through today. But first, let's start off by just defining content. When we're defining content, we're essentially talking about what the site will be about. So what is this site about? And the key thing to look at there is, what will it be about? Right? I don't necessarily have the exact words that are going to be on the site or the exact pictures that are going to be on the site. Right? There are a multitude of ways that we can represent what our site is about. Right? Pictures, video, audio, text, a combination of all of these. But the exact words and the exact pictures and the exact videos don't matter. Right? When we are concerning ourselves with content and content generally, when it's related to design, the exact words and the exact photos and the exact videos don't matter. You're looking for general ideas. You're kind of looking for vibes, if you will, to kind of bring it into a 2023 perspective there. Because that's what's going to build the bridge between the content and the design. So with that, we basically come to 2 points when we talk about design and content. One is that web design is content dependent. Right? So the way that we design our website, the look and feel, the voice is dependent on the content. But it's more dependent on the content from this abstract perspective of the content. From this idea of vibes. Right? Because I think we also talk about it a little bit later on in this presentation, but a big thing about the content of a website is that we can change it. We can change it easily. We can look at a website as a living document in that sort of way. Right? So when we talk about web design being dependent on content, we're talking more about the general ideas. We're talking more about the vibes. We're talking more about the feeling of the content than we are the exact words, the exact pictures, the exact videos, whatever. Right? Because those can all change, and they can change easily. But another thing that we need to remember here is that the content interacts with the design. Right? So the way that we lay out the content and where we put different things and where we put different pictures and where we put text interacts with the design. So in that sort of way, web design, the design of the site is content dependent. But the content is dependent on the design of the site because the design influences layout, and layout influences how content is read, right, as we've talked about in previous weeks, and how content is interacted with. So they're independent, but they're also interdependent in different ways. which I think is quite interesting when we're talking about, theories and concepts related to web design and the content that is on a site. So one is that we can say that web design is content dependent, right? Like when we talk about the process that we've been discussing all semester long of how we design a website, at the core of that is the content, right? Having the ideas, doing the research, getting this general lay of the land, the general ideas that we get from design discovery, that is content, right? Those are the general concepts that we're talking about. Those are the vibes that we're talking about when we're talking about a content of the web for the website. Right, so the content is there before we ever start to put pen to paper and draw a thumbnail sketch, or we ever start to open up Figma and draw things out in there, right? Content is always there. It's there from the beginning. We might not know the exact words that we're going to end up with on a page at the end of the process, but the content is there. One of the fathers of modern web development, Jeffrey Zeldman, once said that content precedes design, and design in the absence of content is not design. It is merely decoration, right? And this gets back to that interdependence that I was talking about earlier, right? Because the content is there before the design. The content provides the feeling, it provides the ideas, it provides the vibes, it provides the emotion. And so then we can take these ideas that we get from content and push them forward into how we design. And so content precedes design. In order to adequately inform our design, we need that content. Design in the absence of content is not design, it is decoration. Right? Think about taking a book, any just random book off of a shelf, and maybe a kid gets a hold of your, maybe you have a young child, or maybe a young child, and you have a book on a shelf, and maybe that book is, some sort of classical piece of literature, some sort of, Jane Eyre, something serious, Les Miserables, some big, heavy, serious book. And so there are connotations that come with the content of that book, right? There are ideas, there are vibes, there are emotions, there are feelings. And imagine a little kid gets a hold of that book, 5, 6 years old, 4, 5, 6 years old, and they have stickers and they have markers and they have glitter and glue, and they design the cover of that book, right? By just adding stickers and adding, glitter and adding little small child drawings. And now you have this book that has this super serious subject matter, that has this heavy, deep content. But the design that's on the book cover is glitter, unicorn stickers, right? Completely incongruous. So that's not design, right? Like that's not there to support the content. It doesn't provide you with any information that is relevant to the content. It's merely just putting stickers on a book cover. Right? There's no connection there. And so that's what Zeldman's talking about here, is that if we don't use content to inform our decision makings, and we don't use the information that we get out of discovery and these ideas and these feelings that we get from that phase of design, and we're just building a website, we're not designing. We're just decorating. we're just adding glitter and stickers to some unrelated content. And when we look at that, we can go even deeper there, and we can say that style for its own sake doesn't really solve any problems. Right? Style for its own sake doesn't really solve any problem. I mean, there are, we could make the argument that something looking nice does solve certain problems. Right? But there's a difference between something looking nice while being appropriate with the content and something just being styled in general, right? So sorry about that. Just a brief interruption, and we are back at it. So style for its own sake doesn't solve any problems. When we're talking about something looking nice, it's great for something to look nice, right? Because that can hold somebody's attention. If it otherwise looks bad, right? That's something that could draw somebody off of the site. But in general, it's just stickers on a book, right? It has to make sense. It has to look nice. And so we want that to work. So we take this form, we take making it look nice, and we make it secondary to the function. We make it secondary to our problem-solving techniques and the things that we need to do to solve our problem. And so I've been reading a lot here lately about this move toward HTML first development. Starting out and just building the entire page in HTML before you even touch CSS at all. Right? Which is sort of an anti-pattern in relation to standard rapid prototyping technique. But in that sort of way, it's a smart idea because that allows us to ensure that we're including the things that are solving our problem. It allows us to ensure that we're including the information that we need to be able to get things done. And it's critical for us, right? And so it's a good thing. So we just want to kind of follow the process that we've laid out throughout the semester, right? We do the discovery, we do our research, we understand the content first, and then we move on to the actual design elements, right? So when we have properly crafted content, it's a critical element of user interface design, and it really should help design or help drive our design decisions, right? All of our design decisions are being made off of information informed. Have a reason for everything that you do. And that reason is based in the content, it's based in the feeling, it's based in the vibes, those general ideas that we've discussed, right? So how does content then interact with design? Well, to understand how content interacts with web design, we have to contrast it with print design, right? So when we are working with a print design, when a piece is printed, it's finished, right? A printed piece is dead. Whenever I talk about this, I always talk about a story of, several years ago, I was working as a graphic designer, And there was this big project. And they had me design something, and it went through all the processes, and it got approved, and it got sent off to print. And they printed several thousand of these items. And they got it back, and they realized, oh no, they had given me some wrong information. Something about the information was wrong. And so what does that mean? You know, for a printed piece, you can't just take the printed piece and change the information on it, right? Like, it's a nice looking printed finished piece. If you want to change the content on that printed piece, you have to remake it, redesign it with the information on it. And have it reprinted at a high cost, right? But a website's different. A website, on the other hand, is different, right? A website, we can update it, we can change it at any time. There's not a big cost to it. A website's alive. It's a living document. And so the way that the design interacts with the content is that we can go in and we can change content at any time. And when we change content, the content can change the layout a little bit because we can have more area or less area that is filled by content. And we can also see the way that we choose to lay out sections of our website can influence certain content being prioritized over other content, as we've kind of discussed throughout the semester. So these are key elements that we're dealing with there that are super important, because we see in real time content interacting with the website. And so how do we manage content on a website? Well, one of the things that we do is we use a content management system. Some of you might have already taken the content management system course. Others of you might be taking it might be going to take it in the spring. But we do a content management system course here as part of the program, right? And the content management system effectively separates design and content on the back end, right? So not only are we talking about design and content being separated and approaching it in that sort of way, but this actually physically separates the design from the content. We also use web standards, right? You know, we go back to Jeffrey Zeldman again. Jeffrey Zeldman, in his pretty famous, he has a pretty famous book. I have a copy of it down in my old office that is about web standards and creating the web standards. He was one of the first people to really write about a standardized web. So he's done a lot for modern web development, modern web design. And so having these web standards in place can help us manage content on the web, because we have these standards where things are sort of normalized. And so if we can normalize how we display our content, then putting it in context with a design, not as big of a deal. Right? There's also these 7 stages of content management. And I will typically utilize these 7 stages of content management to form a larger content management process. And this will be where we wrap up today. I told you it was a short one today. Right? Organization, classification, storage, workflow, editing and versioning, publishing, and removal and archival. And so these, this is the order in which we try to think about content management, or the order in which I try to think about content. And you can see where publication lies. Right? Publication is way down here toward the end. We're getting things together, we're classifying it, we're storing it, we're working with it, we're editing it and versioning it, and we're publishing it. So we can see here that there's a lot of thought that should be going into content that's going onto a website before it goes onto the website. Now, sure, things are a little friendlier because we can take advantage of the fact that a website is a living document and change things more frequently. But we don't necessarily want to do that, right? Like if you have a website and you have a website that you want to be able to work and solve your problems and do the things that you need it to do, you don't want to really need to change the content all the time. Because if you're changing the content with regularity, then that might cause some issue with your audiences who come back to a slightly different website every time they revisit. Right, and again, we want to take these different steps of the process here, and we want to build a process of our own based on these steps that determine how we're going to look at data, or how we're going to look at content, rather, and how we're going to push content to the website. Because you also can't have everybody just putting content on the website whenever they want to, right? Especially if you're working in a larger organization where you might have multiple people managing multiple pages within a website. You need some sort of process and workflow to determine that the right content is reaching the right pages at all times. So looking at these steps here and kind of understanding, okay, we need to organize our data. We need to get everything together. Then we need to classify the data. Where does it belong? Store the data. We need to put it somewhere, right? We need to have long-term storage. We need to have backups. We need to have, different things to where we have our data together and stored. Put it through some sort of workflow. Edit it, version it, right? When we say workflow here, we mean like an approval process, or, it could mean different things for different applications. Running it through some checks, edit it, version it, and then we can publish. And then finally, right, you might need to remove it at some point. And if you need to remove it, you need to remove it, and that's fine. But I think a better thing to do with it here is archival, which is the second part there. Storing it for posterity, just in case you need to go back, revisit some old content, or maybe you need to look things up from the way you used to do things, or maybe you just want to go back and reminisce sometime. That's there too. So what I encourage you all to do is to think about these 7 stages of content management and just sit down and kind of write out your own workflow that would go along these lines. And I think that would help out a lot in terms of determining your best course of action for dealing with content on a website yourself. And so that's where I want to wrap up today. That's all that I have for you. I told you all this would be a short one. And it is. We'll pause for any questions right now. So just in case anybody has any questions, we will just sit for a second, just in case. Since I'm not seeing any, we'll go ahead and stop here. Thank you all for watching. If you have any questions that you come up with later on, send me an email or a Teams message and let me know, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.